All right. Well, welcome again to a new episode of the KewCast. I am John, and I'm joined again by my good friend Eddie. How are you doing, buddy?
Great, John. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's going to be another couple weeks after this podcast because I postponed my trip to Yellowstone. So actually, we'll do a podcast next week, and then the Yellowstone is the week after that. So we got 2 in a row, then another week break between.
Sounds good.
It's been crazy.
Gives me 2 weeks to get ready for a solo podcast.
Yes, that's right. Eddie's breaking out solo.
Nope, not interested.
What's the podcast called?
The KangCast.
The KangCast.
The King Kang cast.
The big Kang.
There you
big
go.
Kang theory cast. Yeah. How has your 2 weeks been?
Good. We you and I got together last weekend for just a friends round robin tournament. Yeah. How many teams? 8 teams?
8 teams. Yep.
Yeah.
And we started like at 7:30, or at least got there at 7:30.
Yeah.
So pretty early. It's been really hot here in Colorado.
Yeah.
Anyway, good players, good times.
Yeah.
We didn't do so well.
No, we kind of pooped the bed a little bit.
We did. It was pretty clear that you and I need more practice together.
There were quite a number of shots where neither of us got the ball, or we were right on top of each other.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
We'll
we
get
just
there.
need more hours on the court together.
Not too bad overall. We came in third after the round robin.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, normally, one person's up while the other one's down, and it switches. And hopefully, you're both up. We started kind of up and ended up both down here, performance-wise.
You made a very pithy comment at the end there.
What did I say?
You said, I should have just stayed at home.
Yeah.
It wasn't terrible. I did learn a very important lesson, though, and it's something I've never done before, and that is I made an adjustment to my paddle the night before, which was, in retrospect, one of the dumbest things you can do in a competitive situation.
Yeah. So you just weren't feeling it in terms of aim and...
There was no real reason to change things up. I wanted to just change the overgrip to have a fresh grip for the round robin. And for some reason, I'm like, well, I got the grip off. I may as well throw on a slice cap because I like that. But that's not the time to do it.
Yeah, not right before even an unofficial tournament.
It does change things significantly, and it does take some time to adjust to a new balance point and the rest of it. But the night before,
not a good idea.
Even a friendly tournament is not the best time.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Mario for setting up the tournament and everybody that participated. It's good to see, we go way back with all of those folks, and all of them are improving.
Oh, since day one, when I moved to Colorado, I had met some of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to chat. I was nervous to talk about it on previous podcasts, but now that, just because it's kind of a proprietary information, so I'm not going to get into too much details, but I saw Chris mention it on his podcast last week. But take you back to not to Newport, to San Clemente, to our tournament there. The last day I was there, I swung by and paid a visit to a factory that produces paddles for carbon, the CRBN carbon. And they shout out to Nam for bringing me into his shop, and his dad Hung. They have this local shop there, and it's not all of Carbon's production. Clearly, they outsource the majority of their stuff to China, but they do have pretty good capacity in this local shop in California, and they kind of run the research and development side of Carbon. And it was really cool to see, firsthand what it looks like to develop a paddle. I mean, they had CAD, and they can crank out a paddle from scratch. It's like idea about a paddle, dimensions. Okay, put it in CAD, and they have this machine that cuts it out. And they're playing with all these new materials that I can't talk about. But I hit around with the paddle outside, one of the newer ones, and man, these things are going to be really popular paddles. I mean, really good stuff. Also, they source everything locally. They actually use. It was fun to see the peel ply process. There's actually you can take the cloth off the peel ply to expose it, and this is all American sourced carbon fiber and everything else. So really cool to see, and I have a lot of confidence now in carbon moving forward. They had their issues with delamination, disbonding, core crushing, with everybody else during the heady days of thermoforming Gen 2 throughout all last year, I would say. But I think they've really struck a gold mine in finding this particular person and facility to work on the research, design, and quality control as well.
That is really interesting. Be cool to see. I'm curious. I mean, I know you can't talk about some of the tech they're working on, but can you talk about what process they have for what direction to move in as far as requirements, or what is it that they're sort of targeting when they do their prototyping?
What's the performance of the paddle going to be like?
Yeah.
Well, they can vary all of the performance metrics based on some new tech that they're using and different configurations of that new tech. So it can be as powerful as a Gen 3 Yola down to control-sided spectrum, right? So the one I played with was really powerful, but it felt really good also in terms of it wasn't not controllable power. It was big sweet spot, and similar to the Yola Gen 3s where you felt like, okay, this is controllable power.
Right.
Spins there, so I feel like they're ready to start releasing these, but hopefully sooner rather than later. So well done, Carbon, and thanks again, Nam and Hung, for hosting me in their shop. That was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah. Shall we move on then to latest news and gear gossip?
Gossip, yes.
Excellent. First of all, I wanted to mention that I don't think they're sold out yet. Last I checked yesterday, they weren't. But I bought this Braden from Pickleball Effect collaboration paddle with Volair, their Mach 2 Forza, and you can see it here.
On their latest podcast, they did say that there was still a few from their first run.
Yeah. Nice. They didn't send this to me for free. I bought it, and I didn't even tell them I was buying it. It's just a really good charity. It's for Braden's brother. So you can go watch his podcast about that a few weeks ago, where he opened up about his brother. Buy a box of Kleenex for sure before you watch that podcast, because it's very touching and emotional. But really great. Looks cool, and I'd love to support my friends, obviously. But also it goes to a really worthy charitable cause.
You planning on hitting that one or leaving it pristine?
No, that's gonna go with my Yola Ben John's 1,000 gold medal and a couple other collector's items.
Your investment paddles.
Investment paddles. Okay, right. So yeah, congrats, Braden, on that. Good to see it, and it looks really sharp. It's really cool.
I haven't seen a paddle with that much gold.
Yeah,
it looks cool. It's very very sophisticated looking.
For sure. All right, well, let's move on to another new release. Behind you, Eddie, is the new Reload paddle, which has been under development now for a couple of years, I want to say. And I saw a comment in one of my early videos early last year from a gentleman, Nick, and ended up following. You could tell I could tell he knew what he was doing. So I followed up with him. We started exchanging emails, and he and I were doing the dissections really early of paddles and kind of exploring what is peel ply, and kind of changed my perspective on what I was looking at under a microscope. And, he let me know early last year he was working on a replaceable skin technology for paddles. And, it took a long while. He got a patent on it. But yeah, it is now here. They have one shape so far, and you can go just Google Reload paddles, and this will come right up. They have a very slick website, and unlike the Pickle paddles, the PIKKL paddles with the replaceable skins, the Pickle paddles are like a etched face. It's not raw carbon fiber. These are actually raw carbon fiber sheets that stick onto a paddle that does not already have a facing material. So, the paddle, you can see, it's really easy to replace these two, but underneath the skin is just a surface you would not play with normally. So putting the skin on does not add a lot of weight. Although I did run the tests on this with the graffiti, and it is a larger swing weight than I was expecting. It was, I think, like 125.68 or something, so it rounds up to 126. And it does feel a little head heavy. I don't know if I got a one-off, but it's playable for sure. I think that is probably lighter than the pickle, paddles with their skin over the existing peel ply.
Yeah.
And again, this is an elongated paddle. I would imagine that the standard, well, I know, this particular shape with the arrow curve at 16.5 inches long is going to have an average of about 121 swing weight for raw carbon fiber equivalents. So it is a little higher in terms of the swing weight. It got great spin. I think it was 2,100 RPM is what I clocked with the spin. It did feel a little softer. I need to put in more time with this to see the power and pop statistics are right around 50%, the 50th percentile in my database. And I did notice, dinking around with it in the garage and then running the tests on it. It felt a little softer than.
And you said that's the only shape they have right now.
Only shape they have right now. I'm sure they are working on other shapes, but yeah, this is their. Basically, it's the Hyperion shape, right?
So, what are your thoughts on the overall concept of a replaceable skin?
Oh, I think it's definitely the way of the future. It's. I'm sure they have other shapes in the works, but this is probably not for everybody given the higher swing weight. But it's definitely playable, and it's not the most powerful paddle. It's not the most control-oriented paddle. It's kind of right in the middle, metrics-wise, in my database. But like I said, I do need more time with it. But it plays perfectly well. It feels like, and it's thermoformed also. The guts of this are, unibody, edge foam, and it's a. I think to your question, I think this is the future if they can get it to where they can maximize the power on some paddles, maximize the control on other paddles, and have all of the options for the existing paddles on the market. I mean, the price. They definitely tried to start with a subscription plan that didn't go over well on Discord, so they switched last minute to just, all right, you want to buy it? We're going to have an introductory price for the paddle with 2 sets of skins for $150. That's a really good price, right?
It is.
Yeah, I think the normal price after this initial phase is going to be $200 for the same thing. So again, that's one paddle with 2 sets of skins. The skins themselves cost $40 for 2 sheets. So basically, to replace those sides of your paddle, $40, which a little more expensive than the pickle skins, but I would argue that the raw carbon fiber,
it feels really high quality.
Yeah, the peel ply texture is. I think way better than what Pickle has to offer right now. I think Pickle's also working on different options for theirs as well. So 2 sheets for $40 or 6 sheets for $100. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a very valid option. If I were buying all of my paddles and weren't getting them, people weren't sending them to me. I love playing with the fresh paddle, a fresh raw carbon fiber paddle, and it plays so much differently than that same paddle does a month or 2 later. So it'd be nice to have this
totally
option.
see it night before a tournament while you're messing with your grip and your slice cap. You throw on a new sheet and
right.
you're good to go.
Right. I'll be interested to see. By the way, Nick didn't send us. I didn't even reach out to him. I just bought it. I know he's a startup company, so I didn't feel like asking him for a free paddle. So I just bought it from his website. It showed up in a couple of days, and
is that the only color available?
I think so.
Okay.
Ran the metrics. I know Chris, I think, is expecting his today, so we'll see what his swing weight is. I think I saw on Discord that some people were saying that I didn't even notice that it was advertised for 118 swing weight. So that's a pretty significant diversion from, if that's true, from what was advertised. So, like I said, interesting to know if this is just a one-off, if I just got a heavy one, or if all of
Sounds
them
like
are
without
gonna
the skin, it might come in around there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which is kind of the same issue that we're having with the pickle paddles, right? But yeah, it feels great. Good build quality. I do like the looks of these sheets a lot. It's got and they're super easy to put on and off. Obviously, it's not as difficult as putting on a screen protector on your iPad or iPhone.
From what I understand, they're going to be licensing this technology.
I'm pretty sure that was an intention originally. The intent being, okay, 6-0 can make paddles using reload skins, something like that. I think that's a good idea. I don't know if it's actually going to materialize anytime soon, but
I would think it'd be very difficult for a small company to be on the cutting edge of something like this technology and on core development and other, really sort of cutting edge innovations. That's my concern, is that the skins are great, but will the core hold up to next gen cores?
Exactly. Let's say that the next gen cores eventually USAP and Yola come to terms, and we've got foam options in the cores. Right? Do they have the kind of capital necessary to?
Yeah, I could totally see it if cores are pretty much where they're at, and we don't expect to see a whole lot of groundbreaking technology. But at this rate, it's so dynamic that I would find it very challenging to be on sort of the cutting edge of that and these technologies. But hey, I think it's a great start.
And I think it would be nice also to know how long the cores are going to last, given that it's thermoformed. Mm-hmm. I didn't even look at the return policy, but cores crushing is an issue with thermoformed paddles. So, even if you're able to replace the skins if the core is broken, then that's going to be an issue. But I'm sure Nick has thought about all this. I also know I saw some of his messages on Discord that he's working on, like Kevlar carbon fiber twill weaves for the replacement sheets, and they'll be different. I'm sure titanium's on the way, and all the new things he will be offering.
It would be fantastic technology to be able to throw on to your favorite paddle, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And if the skin was, say, not exactly form fitting to the paddle face, but something, a little bit bigger than the sweet spot, where you hit 98% of your shots,
right?
I think there's some more universal application there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, more to come.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to some latest news, not extremely latest news, but 2 weeks ago in APP Newport, the issue with the Proton paddles. They're Series 1 paddles, the ones with the nanotech kind of grippy surface. Apparently there was an issue, and I'm not going to get into any gossip here. I just want to try to stick with the facts, which aren't many right now. So there will be more coming as we learn more about this issue. But they pulled the Series 1 Proton paddles from the tournament, so you couldn't play with them, at least at the pro level, maybe even amateur, because of a purported issue with one of the paddles. We don't know exactly what the issue is. And USAP is the regulatory agency for APP. They're the ones doing the paddle testing. So apparently a paddle got pulled, and then they came back and said, no, this is out of spec. We don't know exactly why. Well, I can get into a little bit of speculation, because I'm pretty sure that the issue was the coefficient of friction, like how sticky the surface is, which, rightfully a lot of people are nervous, given that USAP seems a little trigger happy right now with delisting paddles, that, is Proton Series 1 next. And it was bad timing for Proton, because after being out of stock of this paddle for so many months, finally they teamed up with Pickleball Central to distribute their paddles. So they took that kind of logistical nightmare out of their own shop, handed it to somebody with a lot more capacity, Pickleball Central, and they went on sale that week with a whole bunch in stock. They did sell out. They're still a very popular paddle, but I'm sure the owner of Proton wasn't happy that the timing of this, the way it happened. So if it was coefficient of friction, how sticky the surface is, it's odd to me that it would be flagged at a tournament, because as far as I know, they don't use a machine at the tournament to measure coefficient of friction, right? I think it's exactly the same at APP tournaments as it is at PPA tournaments in terms of the equipment they use. They're different. So it's Pickle Pro Labs at PPA, it's USAP at APP. Too many acronyms here. But I'm pretty sure the USAP on-site just does deflection testing, and they also have a stare it if they want to check the grit. I don't think they're testing for friction. So it's odd to me that a paddle will be flagged, if that's the case, for friction at a tournament, and to the extent that they would say, no, you can't play with these particular paddles here.
Is the stare test even relevant to a nanotech type surface?
No, I mean...
Right, because there's no peaks and valleys.
Yeah, exactly.
In that, right? It's completely smooth.
Yeah. So, I mean, the equivalent of the stare it for the nanotech would be the coefficient of friction. But, so curious to me that it happened at all. It'll be interesting to see what's happening. We've not heard anything from USAP about this, and I've only heard speculation. Like there's some conspiratorial things about political maneuvering and that sort of thing I'm not going to get into, but yeah, I wish the situation were less murky, but it is what it is right now.
Man, between this and Diescu, I mean, Proton can't catch a break.
Right. Tough days for Proton. But we'll talk about their Series 4 paddle, which is not nanotech, so the same issues aren't going to be applied to this paddle. We'll get into that later. All right, let's move on to paddles and gear of the week. Why don't we start with the Fat Boy? The Fat Boy is not...
Man, the paddles are coming in like crazy.
They are pouring
What's going on?
I thought the peak was like last month, and now it's just the peak is continuing.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
You've got it on your side.
All right. And I think this has been teased enough, and I think I even showed it, or at least had it on the wall in our previous podcast. But Doug from Bread and Butter has been working on the Fat Boy actually for longer than the Shogun, just the R&D on this. And I've been really interested in it because this is his first A, Kevlar surface paddle, and B, wide body paddle. And you and I got a chance to hit around with it a little bit in
Texas,
Dallas. Yep. When Doug was there, and he sent each of us one. I've been hitting around with it for the past week or so. And Eddie, have you had much of a chance to hit with it?
I played with it last night, and it plays just as good as it did in Texas.
Yeah.
Man, the twist weight on this thing's got to be like, what, 25?
Actually, I've got it.
No, probably
got it in here somewhere. It's
7.3.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yes.
I'm just guessing. It seems very stable. Sweet spot seems massive.
Yeah, big twist weight, big sweet spot, and it's Kevlar-faced, so it does play a little plusher, in my opinion, than a raw carbon fiber only paddle would. It's thermoformed. So yeah, that combination of the Kevlar plushness with the wide sweet spot is nice. It's control oriented, I would say, but I was getting a lot of pop out of this thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's not just the fact that it's a little more maneuverable because it's shorter. You know, you can go from 0 to 100 on this pretty quickly. I think it's also in the construction, something about the Kevlar combined with the thermoformed paddle is just a pretty poppy paddle. So it kind of hits that nice balance point for me where it feels kind of plush and the control is there, obviously, when you need it, and it's got all the specs for control. But if you are at a hand paddle at the kitchen, you can put it away pretty easily.
Resets and blocks, with the sweet spot being as big as it is, it's so predictable.
Okay.
Piece of cake.
Yeah, for sure.
Or donut.
The handle's a little bit on the shorter side.
Yep.
I think it's advertised as like 5 1/4, but given the taper, I took the rubber band off, and I can get 2 hands on this with the finger on the back pretty easily.
Bread and butter grips lately have gotten so thick that for me it's just the first thing that's got to come off. I've noticed it with the Shogun. I noticed it here as well. They're really, in my opinion, they're too chunky for me.
Okay, that one feels pretty.
That feels pretty thick
small.
to me.
Thick. Okay.
Yeah.
Hand me that Shogun. I felt it on the Shogun for sure, but this one didn't feel as thick. Yeah, this one feels a lot thinner to me than the Shogun. Try them side by side.
They're pretty close.
Are they? All right. Well, yeah, I think there's this 4.25 inch circumference, which I think paddle handles are trending towards more thinner and thinner. And certainly that's becoming my
Luckily, it's an easy
as
change.
Well. It's an easy change, yeah. But yeah, it's interesting that I used to love really thick handles. I used to I would take the stock grip, leave it on, and put another stock grip over it, and then a over grip over that. And it felt like my old tennis racket to me, and I liked that. But now I realize pickleball is a different game. You need more finesse and the ability to extend your wrist in different ways than you do in tennis.
There's a certain population of players out there, John, that would buy a paddle based on the sweet spot alone. Mm-hmm. If there was a table that listed the area of a paddle sweet spot, this one's near the top.
Right.
And I think there's a good segment of the population that wants that and needs it.
Yeah. And I'm happy to see more control-oriented and standard and wide-body paddles becoming more and more popular and accepted this year than previous years. I think that is a very worthy trend in pickleball. Mm-hmm. Fat Boy's not out yet. It's coming out, I think, next week. I'll put some dates in the description for the podcasts. But yeah, it's coming out soon. These initial runs, which were like the prototypes, didn't have the greatest spin. I noticed that. I think, I was chatting with Chris and Braden and Will, and, the spin's fine, but I think it's less than 2,000. And I was talking with Doug, and he's sending us the production models. I think there's overnighted coming in today, tomorrow. And we'll see if the spin, and not that this was unplayable, but
it did feel a little smooth, but I didn't notice like any deficiencies.
Yeah. I mean, I love a spinny paddle. I would have liked more spin on this one, but I'll update everybody on the production models and let them know. I imagine that the spin will be better.
Do you remember the Fat Boys?
Was that a show?
It was like original OG hip hop rap.
Oh, was it?
From
Yes.
like the 70s, I think.
I'm getting it conflated with Fat Boy Slim, but yeah. Anyway. We're old, Eddie. We're old.
Yes, indeed.
Now I remember, it was the Fat Boys. Let's move on.
Sure.
The Proton is coming out. So these paddles are still unreleased, just like the Fat Boy, but I think within the next 2 to 4 weeks is the anticipated release of the Proton Series 4. Now that is the plan. Who knows if it'll materialize? They have their hands full right now, and they have for months. But I did want to kind of chat about it because it is an edgeless Kevlar-faced paddle. And I got a chance to hit like one game with it while I was in Phoenix for that Proton event. And Charles, the owner, sent me this a couple of weeks ago. So I've had it for a couple of weeks. And I hit around with it for a few games. I modified it with perimeter weighting, and then gave it to you just a couple of days ago. So we both had a chance to hit with it. Eddie, what are your impressions of it?
So I'm a sucker for an edgeless paddle. This is one of the prettier ones out there. I love the blue trim. I think it looks great. Elongated shape, which I think is has its positives and negatives. But it's hard for me to talk about this paddle because you did so much to it to to customize it. I mean, I don't know how much weight you have on the edge there, but it's probably, 14 grams of weight.
Close to it, yeah. Yeah. So
that's going to open up the sweet spot on any paddle.
Right.
You've got the slice cap on there as well. Mm-hmm. So I would love to have a shot at this paddle stock or with just a minimal amount of weighting, but it played great. I played, I think, one game with it over the weekend, another couple games yesterday, and it felt really solid.
So it is an elongated paddle, so 16.5 by 7.5. It has a longer handle, 5.5-inch handle. And like you said, Eddie, I hit with it with that stock, and I was like, I need some weight on this. Mm-hmm. Like every edgeless paddle I ever hit with. I mean, possibly not true of the Double Black Diamond Infinity. It hits pretty well, but I still like perimeter weight. So I added quite a bit of stuff. Like I said, I have an ounce in the cap, and I have the Pickleball Effect tungsten tape, the heavier one, the 1 gram per inch, right at the start of the top of the grip up to, I'd say, close to the middle of it. And then I have the lighter weight Selkirk tungsten tape, which is really lightweight, but I have that 6-inch strip on both sides going up all the way up to the top. So, I started with just a lesser amount of tungsten along the shoulders, and I still felt a little bit of buzz up here in a smaller sweet spot, kind of a teardrop going in the opposite direction than I wanted. So I just kept adding weight. And this sucker is 9.5 ounce static, but given the weight distribution with the weight in the cap and the way I put the heavier tape down on the bottom, so that the balance point's still low and it still feels very maneuverable.
You have a swing weight on that?
Hands.
The way you've got it set up?
123, 124 maybe.
Not terrible.
Yeah, so not too bad. But I love the way it plays with this weight. So again, it's an elongated paddle, so I'm not expecting too lightweight of a paddle. And I know that contradicts kind of what the purpose of a edgeless paddle is, but to me, the trade-off is great with this weight setup. I don't feel with the lower balance point that I'm losing too much hand speed with that higher static and swing weight. But yeah, with that weight, it did spread out the sweet spot. This is a pretty powerful paddle. Not out of the box, I'd say it's a little bit above average stock, but with all this weight, it hits hard.
I was going to say, I was actually surprised by the amount of power it has.
Right.
Of course, all the modifications assist in that, but it's hard.
It does. It's good in power and pop. And I put in my database. I updated my database yesterday with a bunch of paddles that I'd been sitting around on for a while. Yeah. And this was one of them. I put in the stock information in the database. So even stock, it was above average power. And now it's a pretty hot paddle. I also love what Proton did with the graphic design of this paddle.
It looks great.
So much better than their Series 1
paddles. My goodness.
Yeah. And, it's catchy, catches your eye, good colors.
It doesn't look like somebody threw up after watching Miami Vice.
Right. I'm a victim of the 80s, man. I can't go back to the 80s. I know it's popular now, but, oh, man, I just can't do it. So, yeah, I need more time with it overall to know exactly what I think about it, but initial impressions are positive.
I agree. 100%.
All right, moving on. So when I was, again, another San Clemente story, when I was at that PPA event, I saw Bodhi, who used to work with 6-0. Now he's off on his own, but he's starting to make some pickleball products, and he has these grips. I kept seeing these pros playing with Bodhi grips, various pros, and then I saw Bodhi, and he's like, hey, here, take these with you and see if you like them. So I'm really particular about my grips.
Same.
Yeah, I've been using Yonex Super grips forever, and I've never found another grip that I like. So I have very, very sweaty hands, and if the grip does not absorb that sweat, it drives me crazy. And I like that about the right tackiness and the thinness. Another thing, not many grips are so thin that you can put it over your grip and not cause it to expand too much, right? But yeah, I think these are contenders, I would say, with Yonex Super Grips as probably my favorite over grips right now.
And similarly priced, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I should have got the price, but I did look at it, right after I brought them home, and yeah, they're reasonably priced.
And more colors than Super Grab, so
are they?
If that's a thing for you, then
I always go white on my over grips, but one thing about them is that if you use an overgrip, typically there's plastic on just one side of it, on the exterior of it, and the interior is but there's that plastic peel on both sides of the Bodhi grips. I don't know if that speaks to the quality of it. I'd say they're a little bit tackier, just a little bit, and a little bit softer and plusher than the Yonex, but they absorb sweat just as well, and I like them. I would use these and Yonex interchangeably.
Agree with you on all of that. For me, the Super Grab is, I think, so popular, and I love it because there's not a lot of cushioning in it. I mean, some people like that sort of squishy feel. Mm-hmm. I don't. I like to feel the firmness of the handle. Mm-hmm. That's why I like the Super Grab. This lets me maintain these Bodhi grips, but like you said, a little bit of extra tackiness. Mm-hmm. And again, that's personal preference. Some people actually don't want the extra tackiness because they want to be able to rotate the paddle in their hand between forehand and backhand. But for those with a consistent grip between front and back, forehand and backhand, I think the tackiness of this could be a real advantage.
Right. Which is funny now that I think about it, because Dylan Frazier plays with Bodhi grips, and he spins his paddle relentlessly. You'd think he would put like WD-40 on that sucker so he can spin it, but he's got one of the tackiest grips out there. But yeah, well done on these grips.
So is Bodhi his first name or last name?
Bodhi's his first name.
Okay.
Yeah. He's got some other products. I can't quite recall.
I think there's some edge tape.
Edge tape. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And an eraser.
Yeah. So I like him. Let's move on to our gear deep dive segment here. Yeah. So I kind of wanted to talk a bit more about a new metric that I introduced a couple weeks ago on my latest paddle review, which is firepower. But first, I want to kind of delve into a little more about power versus pop. And I know this is like beating a dead horse. I've talked about it so much. I'm not going to get into exactly what it is, but briefly, Power is the velocity you generate with full swings like serves and drives and overhead putaways. Pop is something that you usually experience at the kitchen with shorter swing paths like punch volleys, and counters and speed ups and that sort of thing. So I've been collecting data on both of these metrics now for over a year now. Isn't that crazy? And I've got, by the way, the paddle database after yesterday's update has more than 200 paddles. We just crested 200 paddles in there.
All right.
Not all of them have every single one of the metrics because a lot of the early paddles that I tested for spin, I gave away. I don't have those anymore to test for power and pop, but most of them do. Well over 100 have all the metrics. But yeah, and then I noticed early on that power and pop are not correlated in a linear fashion. So you can get a very powerful paddle that has very low pop, vice versa, or you can get ones that have middle of the road, or you can get ones with a lot of both or a lot of not much of either, right? That those two areas are really rare, like the high pop, high power paddles. Not many paddles have those. So the Yola Gen 3s had that. The Gearbox Pro line has that. Not many other paddles do. So it's usually a trade-off. And the reason why I wanted to make the firepower metric is because it combines both of those. And a lot of people, even people who watch my videos a lot and know very well the difference between power and pop, still kind of consider power as that sensation you get when you're in hands battles at the kitchen, which is how I define pop, basically, right? That's where you notice the power of a paddle the most, the firepower of a paddle the most, is at the kitchen when you're able to put away a counter, somebody speeds up at you, or you're able to win a speed up, or you're in a hands battle and you eventually put it away. So those poppy movements, I think, is what translates.
But we're still talking about short strokes,
right?
Punches,
right. So that was the impetus for the firepower metric, because it combines both power and pop into a scale of 1 to 100. Anyway, there is a misperception, however. It's been a long-standing misperception that thinner paddles are more powerful than thicker ones. Most companies, up to fairly recently, only a few companies have started to catch on, I think, have come out with their standard paddle, 16 millimeter, and then their power paddle, which is the 14 or less thickness core. And my data just don't really show that that's the case. In fact, it seems to be the opposite, at least in terms of how I'm defining power and pop. So if you look at the average pop percentile in my database for anything less than 16 millimeter paddles, so 14 and below, right? The average for those pop metrics is 57%, 57 percentile, right? So above average pop, right? So that's out of 58 paddles that I have in my database that are sub 16 millimeters thick. So above average pop for those. Power, on the other hand, is flip-flopped. So the average power percentile for those same sub 16 millimeter paddles is 44%, right? So less power, more pop for thinner paddles. Now I take 16 millimeter paddles, not the really thick 19, I excluded the 19, 20 millimeter paddles, but only 16 millimeter paddles, which I have 102 of in my database with all the metrics. The average pop percentile for that is below average, 46 percentile, right, for all of those 102 paddles. And you see the opposite trend where average power for those thicker paddles is 52%. Now, it may not sound like much. Okay, we're talking a few percentile points. What does it matter? Well, it's more pronounced on individual paddles than on average, right? So some of the paddles, the 16 millimeter paddles, have a lot of power and very little pop, and that's typically the trend you see with the thicker paddles. What we see now with the new metric, I think, is kind of it's a good way to kind of eyeball a paddle and say, okay, this is a pretty high velocity paddle. Because what I did with the firepower metric, it's not a percentile, it's based on percentiles. It's a score of 0 to 100, with 100 being the most high velocity paddle, combining power and pop, and 0 being the least, right? So I'll continue to use that metric on my paddle reviews.
But it's based on where a paddle may sit vis-a-vis all the other paddles in your database.
Exactly. It's a fluctuating scale
So I was
based
just
on
going to say
percentiles.
it may change over time.
Exactly.
Okay.
So a score of 90 now might be a score of 80 in 2 months if a bunch of power paddles are released. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. So will there someday be more of a quantitative standard based on a certain measurement?
I mean, conceivably, if people nail down coefficient of restitution and
Yeah.
we get an exit velocity that
Right.
we can all use, then yeah, we could switch over to that and it would be a lot
Something more standardized.
more standardized. Yeah, and less room for error.
Not
But
so much error, just room for just something that's not going to change versus the
sure. I see what you
overall
mean.
population of paddles that are going to be in your database.
Exactly. Yeah, I also want to find a way to easily show within that firepower metric on my paddle reviews how it kind of balances with respect to power and pop. You know, so it's
gotcha.
like it's a score of a 90 firepower leaning pop or leaning power. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a goal, and you know, I'm always kind of playing around with new charts and graphics to kind of capture the essence of the paddle, the fingerprint of the paddle. You know, I have my radar charts that I use a lot, and I've recently reconfigured those. And you know, the firepower is now a part of that radar chart, but it's split up into power and pop. So I kind of want to get a little more granular with the firepower metric to give a sense of, you know, which way it leans.
But bottom line, firepower is the average basically of power and pop.
Yeah, converted to a scale of 1 to 100.
Right.
1 to 100, 0 to 100. Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what might someone expect from a 100 on your scale?
Well,
Something
right
close
now,
to a Gen 3 Yola.
it's right now.
It would be my
right now.
guess,
It's
right?
the Anabright Gen 3. I think is the highest. It's like a 97, 98.
Okay.
And interestingly, the Gearbox Pro, both of those, the elongated and the hybrid shape, are right up there near the top, but they're less poppy than the Yolas were, particularly the shorter standard shape ones. So the Anabright, thinner one especially, was super poppy. So that brought the scores of the Yola slightly up over the Gearbox. But the Gearbox definitely have the Yolas beat in pure power. Big swings that the velocity of the ball doesn't compare to.
Yep.
The
But something
Gearboxes.
like the Black Ace is going to be lower on the scale, despite the fact that it's widely sort of marketed and known as a power paddle, a powerful paddle.
Right. It's way lower on the scale. I think it's just above average. But the pop of that is like still super top tier.
Right.
But the power is not there.
Yep.
Right. You take a full swing from the baseline with the Black Ace and it's just, you don't get much.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you counter something at the kitchen and you get a lot. Right. Yeah.
All right.
So good times. I think it was well received, the firepower metric, and yeah, it's been a long-standing myth. I think that thinner paddles are more powerful, but that is not necessarily the case. And it's not always the case though that thinner paddles are going to be more poppy and less powerful. You know, I just tested the Paddle Tech paddles and those are all fairly thin, like 12.7 and 14.7 or some non-standard measurements. But a lot of those got both high power and pop. Those for Gen 1 paddles, for any paddle, are really hot paddles.
Yeah.
I just put them in my database too, and they're all really high firepower scores.
So your current paddle is the Shapeshifter, which is pretty well modified. And it looks like you've got that in the database
Yep.
with a firepower score of around, what was it, 80?
Yeah, so that is modified with
It's an 80, right. So
Yeah, so that's modified with edge tape, edge weighting, and weight in the cap of the handle. And you know, it started out the stock core shapeshifter, I think, is just above average in firepower, but all the extra weight allowed me to increase, you know, those aspects of the paddle. That's firepower.
So the idea behind this database is not to sort from highest to lowest and just pick the one with the highest firepower score,
Right.
but as you've well demonstrated, it's going to be what works for your game. And in this particular case, you know, something in that not quite at the highest tier, but definitely high performing.
Yeah, for me, that that ticks all the boxes that right now the core shapeshifter with the modifications, because it has the power and pop when I need it, but the control is there also. And if I were to go up to the highest scores on the firepower, the control would be
It
compromised.
seems to me from what I watch of your game is that you put more of a priority on power than pop. Would I be correct in that?
That's an interesting observation. I don't know. It's not something I really have analyzed about my game, but certainly, I like the full swings. Those are fun.
Yeah.
But I also like the backhand punches. That's one of my staples. But other than that backhand punch, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. How about you? Which way do you lean?
I would definitely say power versus pop.
Yeah.
Because I like so many times that I can just get to a ball by blocking it, and I don't want that ball flying 10 feet out. Right. It gives me an opportunity for more defensive opportunities.
Yeah. You are very good at the baseline with your drives. For sure. And everywhere else too, but that's a particular strength of your game.
Appreciate it, John.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right, so let's move on to questions and answers, the Q&A.
Yeah.
Do you have a question that you found this week?
I've actually got a question.
Okay.
And actually, there's others who have had this question in the past, ever since this whole Kevlar revolution, per se, has come about. And that's the best way to clean one of these things, because we've all been using these carbon fiber erasers for a long time and on our older paddles. Is that still sort of best practice for Kevlar weave?
Yes. Short answer is yes. The long answer is there was a hiccup with erasers being used on the first batch of the 6.0 rubies because of an issue that they had with their peel ply. What the eraser should be called is a peel ply eraser, but that's too difficult for most entry-level pickleball players to figure out. What? So it's not just used on raw carbon fiber. It's used on any raw surface, which is a peel ply. So the issue with that 6.0 Ruby, some of the first paddles released in production, was that the eraser somehow got through the peel ply and it tugged at the Kevlar threads and it would pull them through. So you get like a little errant thread. You have to kind of shave your paddle after you use it. And then that led 6.0 to issue a statement saying they don't recommend using an eraser on the Ruby. However, every other Kevlar paddle on the market now there's a ton of them, but even then, so you had the Pickleball apes, those never had an issue with using erasers. So never did it pull Kevlar fibers through the surface. Now, Apes was using a hybrid Kevlar carbon fiber weave, that 3K woven cloth. So there was half of that was carbon fiber. Maybe that played a role in the fact that, you never had any issues with that, versus the 100% Kevlar that 6.0 used on the Ruby, which is the first to the market with 100% DuPont Kevlar. But yeah, subsequent iterations of the Ruby did not have that problem. And I've used erasers on my Ruby the entire time I was using it, including the first gen Ruby, and it never had an issue. So something about some of the original Rubies, the eraser would eat through that peel ply, which is basically epoxy with a texture on it, and catch the threads of the. But all the new Rubies and every other Kevlar-faced paddle on the market right now it's totally fine to use an eraser on. In fact, that's the best way to clean them. I typically rub my paddle with my hands. It's kind of like a habit I have while I'm playing.
I've noticed that.
But it's not as effective as an eraser, but it also, takes a lot of the ball dust off, and I rarely have to use an eraser on my paddles anymore.
So that leads to a follow-up question. One of our audience members suggested that what we call ball dust is actually peel ply dust. Any thoughts on that?
I think I saw that. I don't think I buy that. Certainly there's going to be some peel ply breakage and dust as a result, but I think of the majority of what we're seeing is going to be little chunks of the ball. And in fact, I've looked at, if you go way back to my original carbon eraser review last year, it was like,
that's a throwback, man.
Yeah, that was the third video I think I ever released. I actually looked at.
I gave you that eraser.
You did give me that eraser. I gave you a shout out too. I was like, thanks to my good friend Eddie. But if you go back and look at that video, I looked at the ball dust, at the dust under a microscope, and you could see little chunks of yellow plastic, right?
All right.
So that's the majority of it. And then there was other crap in there, probably actual dust from the cord and probably some peel ply clippings as well. But I think the majority of what we're seeing is the actual breaking down of the ball.
Well, it's not on the ball anymore, so it's got to be somewhere.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of balls, have you had an opportunity to look at the new Vulcan?
I did. They sent me their new formula. They sent me just a can of 3. I was hoping to get a little more, but I played with it a little bit, and it did go out of round pretty quickly. It didn't seem to take as severe of bounces, left or right or up or no bounce as the original. But
Okay.
again, it's another one of these things I need more time with. Have you played with them?
Nope.
Okay. It does feel a little softer than the original, which is promising because the original formula, the harder a ball is, the faster it is, and the more performance oriented it is, but the more probable it is to either crack or go out of round. That seems to be the two issues with hard balls. So Dura, which is the hardest ball in the market, cracked all the time.
Yeah.
But at least it didn't go out of round so much. So I think I would actually prefer the cracking because it's done versus all the other hard balls that go out of round so quickly, including the Vulcan. So I do need more time with the new formula to gather an opinion, but it still seemed to have some issues based on my
All right.
few games I played with it.
Well, we'll get our hands on a few more and see how things go.
Yep, sounds good.
Well, what's next for you?
In terms of plans next week, I've got a few reviews I want to record, or at least a couple, before I take my kids to Yellowstone, because a couple of the releases will be while I'm camping in Yellowstone with my kids. So
I gotcha.
I'd like to record the reviews, including one for the Fat Boy, before I leave. So I'm going to be busy the rest of this week and all of next week, getting back to my roots and doing some paddle reviews.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
Yeah. How about you?
Signed up for the Rocky Mountain Championship. That's a fairly sizable tournament for Colorado. I think about 1,000 people. I'm signed up for men's singles.
Oh, nice.
So it'll be my first competitive singles outing.
Very cool. You're going to have a singles duper score now.
It only goes up from here, from 0.
I haven't played singles in a couple of years, and my singles duper is like at 3.7 or something crazy.
Maybe we'll get some time and you can train me up.
Yeah. I think you're well above a 3.7.
Well, we'll see.
Singles-wise. But yeah, is that this weekend or next?
It is next weekend.
Okay. So you're doing singles? You got any other brackets?
That's it.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. That's cool. I'd never thought about going to a tournament and only doing singles.
It's really about scheduling more than anything. It's on a Friday, so that's easy for me to just take the day off work and be done with it before the weekend.
Nice. I like it. Cool. Well, I will be excited to see how you do in this tournament.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Any other things you want to talk about?
Nope. Happy pickleball to you.
Yeah. Well, good to be back behind the mic. It's been a couple of weeks, and thanks, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Do it again next week.
All right. Until next time.